There is much to be said about human achievements on planet Earth. We went from living in caves and hunting and gathering to these somewhat grandiose and monumental achievements. Remarkable, some would say. We've mastered flight, cracked the genetic code, developed quantum mechanics and democracy, been to the moon, and may soon become a multiplanetary species. Yet, despite these unparalleled achievements, our author today, who I'm interviewing, believes we can be pretty stupid, and I guess I might agree with him. In today's episode of the Intentional Clinician Podcast with Paul Krauss, I'll be interviewing Cezary Pietrasik. He's the co-owner of Synerise, a global AI leader in predicting human behavior. Previously, he was the founder and CEO of a preventive health company, a private equity investor at Warburg Pincus, and an investment banker at JP Morgan, as well as a consultant at McKinsey. This is a very interesting episode, and it is the result of the new book by Cezary Pietrasik. Stay tuned for the interview. Welcoming to the podcast, Cezary Pietrasik. Welcome to the Intentional Clinician. I'm so excited to talk to you about why us humans are so stupid. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Pleasure to be here.
And of course, your book, Homo Idioticus, Why We Are So Stupid and What to Do About It. So I have to say, it's definitely a book in 3 acts. I've been reading it and enjoying it, and also guffawing out loud a number of times, a lot of loud sighs, as you've laid out quite an argument here for what's going wrong, and then also some very positive solutions possibly coming in the future. So, yes, let's start with that. You say at the beginning, 2 things are infinite. This is Albert Einstein allegedly saying this. 2 things are infinite: the universe and human stupidity. And I'm not sure about the universe.
That's right. That's right. So one of the smartest people on Earth pointed to this problem quite early on. And there's now so much more evidence about us getting more stupid from all around. And in my book, I'm actually presenting some of this to actually make the point so that we don't disagree on the starting point, which is that we are stupid. There's tons of research which points to metrics such as IQ, which I don't think is the right metric for stupidity.
Right.
For me, stupidity is anything that is illogical, irrational, or unnecessarily aggressive, or basically causes harm while other paths are available. When in the knowledge of the facts that you have, you could do better. So there is this IQ trend that was observed in Norway and then was confirmed in UK, which is called reverse Flynn effect, when they've noted that originally, since like after Second World War, our intelligence was increasing after every generation. And then in the 1990s, in the mid of 1990s, it peaked and then started actually going down by a few points a generation.
Well, I'm certainly thinking we're witnessing that right now, being a citizen of the world and the United States specifically. I don't think it's hard to miss that evidence, but we'll get into the nitty gritty because that was a study that was done. Here's interesting facts you put in the intro, and I'm not, listeners, before you turn this off, this is not a lecture of being high and mighty or greater than you or self-righteous. The premise of the book is to kind of show what's going wrong and how to fix it. And we all are complicit in this stupidity. And I have theories on that, but I won't get there. But you were just kind of going on some basic things, such as roughly 10% of Americans think the world is flat, which you pointed out could be disproven by catching a plane to Europe, over the Atlantic, and then going from there to Asia, and then coming back over the Pacific Ocean, which would prove the entire premise wrong. 40% of Americans believe God created humans in our current form without any sort of evolution. So in about 5,000 years, which rejects anything before that, any bones found before that could be human in origin. 56% of Americans believe we should not teach Arabic numerals in schools. However, Arabic numerals are what we actually use. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is a little scary. I don't know where you got this. Approximately 86% of American teens cannot reliably distinguish fact from fiction. I guess they need their parents for that. But their parents get their news from Facebook. We're in trouble. You talk about some genocides. Of course, the Rwanda one in 1994. In 100 days, almost 1 million of the Tutsis were, and moderate Hutus were wiped out. So many things going on.
One other thing which is very interesting, which I didn't put there up front, but it attracts a lot of attention. Do you realize that 10% of Americans use phone while having sex?
No, you're kidding me. They're using the phone while having sex.
Yes, 10%.
This isn't boding well for our relationships either.
No.
Are they using it to like text people, or what? Are they like looking at pornography? What's going on here?
Exactly. I'm not part of this.
This is a survey, right? This is a survey. Well, if you're doing that, write in. I would like to know what you're up to. It reminds me of the Seinfeld episode where George has to figure out how to have sex at the ultimate pleasure, and he's got to eat this hoagie sandwich, and he gets caught by his girlfriend. It didn't go well for George. She got broken up with. But apparently people are still in relationships doing this. Climate change, which we could go into, it's clearly going on. It's interesting. Somebody said to me that their parent, who's a climate change denier, finally stopped being a climate change denier because Florida and California stopped covering for certain natural disasters that were happening in more frequency than ever before. And so if the insurance company, which are largely known as quite a conservative, old school status quo institution, are changing their policies, then maybe there is something to this more frequent storms.
Yes, my fiance owned place in Miami, and she couldn't insure it anymore against hurricanes.
Okay, no insurance at all. So anyway, we have all these massive problems and whatnot, but let's talk about this. So as humans, you go on about the societal issues, political, technological, a lot of these things. So I'll look up some of our more of your quotes. But what do you think are some of the causes of this? Because you talk about the illiteracy, the negative fin effect, the lack of understanding of the world, using tools, people thinking conspiracy theories are true to the point where somebody went to this pizza restaurant and that didn't have a basement, that supposedly had a basement with a gun, because they read something on the internet. What do you think is behind some of the stupidity that we find ourselves in?
That is actually quite a number of reasons, and I divided this into four main domains. One is biology, which is definitely difficult to actually fight against because it's just part of us, right? But good to understand, and I can dwell on this. The other one is psychology. The other one is institutions, and then sociology, how we act as a society. Mm-hmm. So those four kind of main layers of our stupidity. And let's start with biology. It's most difficult because it's who we are. We are 99% the same as chimpanzees and 98% the same as pigs. Yeah. So next time somebody calls you a pig, just don't call back with some bad names. Just say, oh, you're 98% right. It's amazing that our body has a number of mechanisms which are difficult to manage. So, for example, and let's take the hardest ones: testosterone. Right? Testosterone obviously it more concerns men than women because men have approximately
more of it. Right.
Causes a lot of problems, particularly aggression. Right. It also is needed, and it's there's good testosterone can be good and is good in a good in the right situations when you need to defend, when you need to stand up to something, when you need to sometimes at work, at sports, etc. But unfortunately, men do a lot of really, really stupid things just under the influence of testosterone, right? To the point of that, certain primitive societies were losing 60% of their men to violence, right? 60%, 60, right? It's Jivaro Indians and some other tribes in Amazonas. Then there comes in biology things such as we never thought about. Things like weather, such as basically our proclivity to be more aggressive when it's hot. So climate change is actually wreaking havoc in a lot of societies because there's a flood of data, which I'm presenting in the book, which shows that higher temperatures cause higher violence. And it's done both on a societal levels, both on individual and particularly fake exercises, such as, for example, training police when they did the same exercise and they checked whether police opened fire or didn't open fire. It was mock situation, so nobody was hurt. But they realized that police opened fire far more often, like 40% more often, when temperature was 9 degrees higher Fahrenheit. Right? Incredible. Then biology also works against us in a situation of stress. So when we are really stressed, our IQ performance goes down by 10 to 13%. There's number of studies about this, including the study when people, before taking the test, IQ test, people were told the car was hit at the parking and it would cost them like $4,000 to fix it. And those who were told this had like 10% lower results than before, or it was the standard group. Similar results were done in 1980s, and even worse, biology is so ruthless when it comes to food, because what we eat, we are what we eat. So it has two edges. So people who eat no food or not enough food, so who are malnutritioned, have up to 15 points lower IQ, and those who eat a lot of fast food had 20% lower results. These were children. The tests were done on a big group of American children. So that's just biology, right? Oh no, sorry, that's not just. There's many more, but one phenomenal which I found, and I was started by it. There's a graph that I'm publishing in a book from Rick Nevin from an economist who looked at it's a correlation of lead poisoning and violence. So basically, lead wreaks havoc in our brains if we have exposure to it as children. And you know that Romans were famously violent, right? And some of the reason is because they were using water from aqueducts, which had lead piping, right? So they were like really violent, and we have been very violent until we removed the lead from gasoline and from our paints. In 1978, the paints were forbidden, and in 1990s, the lead gasoline. And you know what happened? The decline of violence in incredible proportions. All those stories we know about New York, great mayor and police chief and all that, bullshit. It's just decline of population of people who create problems, and less problems per unit of such population caused by lesser lead poisoning.
Yes, I also read Freakonomics, which talked about the population. I don't want to go into that in this podcast, but there was less people born without two parents due to various reasons in the 80s or whatever it was, and the crime dropped significantly in the 70s and 80s in New York, and they thought it was because they were painting the subway and planting trees, which probably had something to do with it, but was not the entire thing there. So
success has always many fathers, and the failure is always an orphan.
Right, exactly. So I mean, with that, I mean, you've already painted something that I wasn't even thinking about in the podcast, which is the environments that are designed outside of the natural world have a massive effect on a lot of people's behavior. As Carl Jung, of course, was not a scientist, but he was a psychologist, and he said that like a lot of his work kind of goes back to this, that most people are just literally asleep. They're unconscious to their motivations, to their behaviors, to why they do certain things. Until you can make the unconscious conscious, you will label it as fate, right? You'll be like, oh, well, that just happens to me. That's just kind of the guy I am. This is what the world does to me, right? These sort of things people say that are completely illogical and emotional based. And then even further, men who have a reputation for being violent and sort of pushy. A lot of men have this sort of, shame complex and ego complex that gets them into a lot of trouble, which is why the car insurance is the highest for men between the ages of 16 and 25, because they are more likely to speed and get in a massively fatal car accident due to not only testosterone, but the ego mechanisms and the sort of behaviors that go along with that if you aren't sort of checking yourself, or if the society isn't checking you, right? So
Yep.
We have a lot of that, and we'll get to the solutions later. But one of the things that stuck with me, so we have the people things, right? Is that societally, we're not really in the United States inventing a community that will be peaceful and harmonious and like each other. In fact, for business reasons, and I'll say that openly, I think that the businesses actually enjoy a crisis and a social crisis and other crises, as long as they don't impact the delivery of services. The emotional crisis, the social crisis that goes on in the United States and people feeling pressed for time actually increases sales in a lot of really fast food, fast soda. I need to stay awake. I can't sleep. I'm going to go buy these sleeping pills. All of these sort of solutions happen due to a lot of the chaos we see in society that maybe has always been there, but we live more individualistically and more in sort of silos than ever before. And I'm not trying to say other societies were better, because there's a lot of problems with enmeshment and horrible boundaries in relationships and abuse that happen within those relationships. But we don't have the people keeping our eyes on us as much. We have cameras. So, for instance, in the United States, we have cameras everywhere. I don't know. The average American is on camera like 25 times a day if they live anywhere near a city. Your car is being monitored. You're being monitored. We don't trust anybody. I went to Portugal recently, and in Portugal, they have all sorts of rules about cameras. You cannot have cameras pointed towards the street. You can't have cameras on the front of your house. The only cameras you can have are pointed directly at your back door or front door, and they can't capture other people. And the joke in Portugal is that the cameras are all of the old folks getting in your business and looking out the window and telling everybody what you're doing, because they're a tight-knit community, right? And it's true. If you look at the World Peace Index, Portugal is number 6, meaning it is one of the lowest crimes countries in the whole world, and has all these positive metrics. Now, they have a lot of other problems with education and other things going on there, but in terms of like violent crimes and anything, or women being assaulted, they are very low crime, because they live together and they have a lot of traditional, and communal pride. So anyway, thoughts on that?
It's a multifaceted question. So yes, there is a problem with the society. Society is getting there's many players in the society, and that actually links to institutions aspect that benefit from the not well functioning society, right? And one of the sectors that I studied well, and I spent actually a lot of time because I built a company in this sector, is healthcare. US basically doesn't have proper preventive healthcare because it is not good for business, right? You being healthy is not good for business. Everybody in US, the big players, want you to be as sick as possible, have many chronic diseases, but not die. Dying is bad for business, right? But you living a long time with chronic diseases is excellent for business, right? That's why the system is designed to perpetuate it, to purpose, right? To support it, to replicate it. And I'm giving tons of examples on that, right? Because the system, everybody takes a cut of the bill. So everybody wants the bill to be the biggest, right? We created the incentives for businesses to operate in a way which are bad for society but are good for them. I'm taking an example of Kaiser Permanente, a really respectable firm in California, which just because they want to make good business, then they end up hurting population. And how? Think about this as follows in terms of the following mechanism, which I observed in California very well. You know what? You can have an MRI scan. You used to have for around $500, $550, sometimes $600 in some local, kind of a little bit rundown, clinics, right? Now it's almost impossible in California because all those clinics were bought out by Kaiser, the leading player there, and they so-called roll out their common policies and common pricing, which means quadrupling pricing. Obviously, monopoly is the best business there is, right? So if you can charge people $2,000 for a scan, why would you not charge them $2,000 instead of $500? And then you know what? If even half of the people resign, you still make more money, right? So unfortunately, it's bad for population because population doesn't, a lot of population just doesn't do it because it's too much. But it's good for business. Similar thing happens with drug prices, right? Similar things happen with regulations. Like if there's tons of regulations in healthcare, big players will be able to do extra report, extra table for the government, extra whatever. They will employ extra 100,000 people. Small business will not. Small business will die, right? And then, why would you build a new clinic if you can just, it's a lot of work. Instead of building a new clinic and increasing capacity and throughput and the amount of people that can be served, why not just increase prices by 5-10% a year? That's just so much easier. So you go home at 5, you don't need to hire new people, you don't need to check equipment. You go home and you live your life.
Yeah, I see this all the time. I'm in healthcare, and the incentives are stacked, like you said, to basically keep people sick. In fact, one of the things I was noticing for outpatient therapy is that the highest paying code is an individual therapy session. Okay. And then from there, it goes down. So that's the highest. So if you do family therapy, so helping more people, it pays less. And I mean a pretty good amount less. So I bring in 5 people and I get paid less. Okay. If I do group therapy at the outpatient level, not the hospital level, hospital levels pays a little bit more. Okay. Because they have other things going on. But if I do group therapy, that pays, it's a joke. It's de-incentivizing to run a therapy group. Now I understand that some people need more than a therapy group, right? They need the individual care. But if you put people that weren't so bad in a group and you taught them skills, they're going to get better. And then maybe they wouldn't need as much individual therapy, right? Here's another thing. The healthcare companies play games with us. Sometimes they say, oh, you can't really do these interventions unless you have these certain diagnoses. And we know as mental health practitioners that almost every single diagnosis in the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, about only 12% of them can actually be measured. Everything else is a subjective interpretation of behavior, and it was meant to inform people in hospitals what was going on with certain patients. And instead, we took these diagnoses and we made them as if they're a cancer diagnosis. Here's the difference. With cancer, I can see the mass, I can look in your blood, and I can see the hard outcome. With most mental health diagnosis, not all, there's a few that you can kind of measure, which I won't get into because that's not what this podcast is about. The measurement may be high blood pressure, right? You can measure that and stress, but you can't, and you can see behaviorally, but they're not consistent. So then we are, and it can be helpful to have a diagnosis, right? But it doesn't fit everybody. So we're trying to shove people in these boxes and then manipulate the paperwork so we can help the person get better. Meanwhile, some people, like this, you said people are not too intelligent. they think that these are lifelong diagnoses that they always will have, and they will turn their identity around it, which is the whole point of therapy, is to get you out of therapy, right?
And that's the problem you mentioned, is exactly the paperwork. The paperwork is killing our healthcare.
Yes.
Because the amount of regulations, administration, metric checking, reporting that is there is just ridiculous. Do you know that 45% of the time of physicians is spent on electronic healthcare systems?
Oh,
They
yeah.
spend almost half of their time typing in things into the system instead of looking at the patient and checking what's there and figuring out, maybe I'll get better diagnosis. Maybe I will figure out this for the first time instead of on the third time, because the first two times I look at the computer rather than the patient.
So, and there you go. And so, that when I worked in state agencies that were publicly funded by the government, that was about 50% of my time. Now it's less, but they're starting to eat into our time with more paperwork, more regulations in the outpatient therapy world. It's really a shame. Like, I thought of this: the incentives are completely wrong. The incentives are to consolidate capital in a small number of companies that have power. That goes to political power, which we'll get there in a second. But one of the things I was thinking about was, what if you said, all right, you have a patient, okay? You are enrolling them in outpatient care. You do the evaluation. Okay, you see what their diagnosis is, even though we know that's just not a real thing, but it's what we have to put down, right? We see these traits, and they say, the insurance company says this: okay, we're giving you 1 year to work with them. If you take the entire year and they're still ill, so they pay you out like a small part of the reimbursement. Right. So you get like 80% of what we would pay, or 70% of what we pay, or 50% of what we pay. Right. And if they still need more care, they got to go to another therapist. Clearly you weren't effective, and maybe they need to go to a different program, but we're only paying you at this rate. If they get better in the shorter amount of time and self-select out and fill out a questionnaire that says, I got better, this is what I'm doing, this is how I'm feeling, and we took real measurements, you not only get paid more, you get paid a bonus.
Yep.
If they did that, I guarantee you therapists will be working harder in session. Patients wouldn't know the difference, except, wow, because everyone knows who the good therapists in town are. Everyone knows who they are. They put their heart into it. They really try hard, and they get paid the same as the therapists that suck and sit there and talk about their own lives and violate ethics and all sorts of shit that just makes people ill or worse. And so, what are we doing? Right. And yet and then even worse, some therapists commit healthcare fraud and put in fake encounters. Okay. And then the insurance companies think they can monitor that with more paperwork. No, the whole thing is wrong. So anyway, back to you. So that leads, well, if we're consolidating money with horrible incentives that are hurting society, but yet some people are getting really, really, really rich, not just rich, really, really rich, to the amount where they can actually pay lobbyists and politicians to do whatever they want with the world with their weird vision. Now we're getting into political stupidity. You want to go off on that?
Yeah. So actually, you manage the big factor. That is very interesting, because we actually have definitely evolutionarily, huge impact for big things, a huge respect for big things.
Yes.
So basically, big personalities, big bodies, big people,
charismatic.
Not only people who project power, and basically raw power, and to some extent aggression, right? And why is that? I was really trying to figure out why so many, in most of cases, the taller candidate in the US wins in presidential elections. Why do we all remember Jack Welch as the president of GE and not any other CEO? Why do we remember Steve Jobs, not Steve Wozniak, who was the actual guy who actually created the computers and built them, and who was giving equity in secret from Steve Jobs out of his own equity to other employees, because he was so frustrated that Steve Jobs was so stingy with sharing his upside with others. So we always love those big figures. We always like those big outside characters. You know why? Because we have evolutionally followed the animalistic world, which is that in animals, typically the biggest animal or the most dangerous, the most violent, the most ruthless is at the head of the tribe. And in the past, humans were like that as well. When there was, the mammoths were coming or lions or whatever, it was the biggest, strongest, fittest men typically, which were supposed to give the first line of defense and die if necessary. That's why we thought that these people should lead us. And you know what? Now we don't die from lions. We don't die from mammoths. But you know what? Our body hasn't recognized it because our body still thinks that we are living in savannah. 98% of our time on this planet, we lived in savannah. And suddenly there's like this rapid change and our body hasn't adjusted to it. We evolutionarily are still living somewhere else because we still think we should follow the big guys, big men.
Yeah, and it makes sense. One of the things that people learn in therapy is why they respond to different stimuli in such a way. Humans, the reason Homo sapiens beat out the other humanoid tribes, we think the Neanderthals and the Devonians, and we interbred with them as well. But why did we win? So one of the theories is the ability to have a large group. And how do you have a larger group? Because the Neanderthals, what they did, they travel in packs of like 10 or 12, something like that. And the Devonians, not really sure, but the Homo sapiens, which of course means wise man in Latin, which we're not really sure why that is that way, but right.
It's the name of my book, Homo Idioticus.
Exactly.
Not economicus, not Homo sapiens, Homo Idioticus.
Yeah. So the thing is that how do you gather a large group of people? You do it through a story. That's oral tradition. The oral tradition of telling a story and coming to a point that people could agree and devote themselves and maybe give up their power to the leader who told the story, right? The keepers of the story. We know this. And so right now we see in the world, the people with the most simplistic and catchy story get the attention. The people with the more nuanced, gray, thoughtful discussion points are like, shut up, you're talking too long. We like this person or this group. They're flashy and they're interesting and they talk really loudly. And I think that they might be right because of that, right? And that is a tale as old as time. So that leads to the political stuff. And then what you describe in here, which was inertia. A lot of our societal and political idiocy comes from inertia. Can you explain what you meant by inertia? Because I know it's a physics concept, but what do you mean by inertia in humans?
Inertia in humans means that we do the things the old way, although because we have always been doing this, right? So there's not enough of questioning of why and checking and rechecking whether what we do is still valid. We keep doing this, right? And there's a lot of things that just don't work anymore. They do not, we need to change, we need to update, and we still, stick by the old things. That's what I mean by inertia, right? And it's in politics, it's in our public life, it's our social, it's from caste system, right? In India, like somebody has invented it, like, how does it matter now? Why would you care? And people still care, right? You are from this low caste, I cannot marry you, right? And there is, like, in politics, there's this stupid law, and I'm showing like the stupidity of the laws through the example of immigration laws in the US. Like, there's basically somebody in the 1950s, I guess, has set up this questionnaire to when you apply for a green card or citizenship green card, you have to fill out this questionnaire. And this questionnaire talks about things like, have you been part of the Communist Party, right? Or like, so if you're, like being in Communist Party in France is quite fashionable. It's quite chic. It's like, it's like, if you're a member of high society, you kind of have this. Or, if you're in China, if you're a successful business, you have to be in Communist Party. In Vietnam, the same, etc. Right? Like, why do you, or you have to self-report yourself. Like, are you a terrorist? Have you done child trafficking? There's questions like this. I'm providing an example in the book. So how many people have self-reported that I'm a terrorist on that? Like, I want to see the statistics of how many people were caught because they said, like, yeah, I'm a terrorist. Have you been involved in genocide? Yeah, I have. Have you been involved in human trafficking? Yeah, of course. Right? Like, there's questions like that. Why do we have that? I
It's a
understand it
joke.
maybe. Yeah, it's like the communist thing was probably from McCarthy.
Yeah, but but the
1950s. But you know what?
idea,
Yeah, 70 years later, like, maybe
still
amend the
using it.
question.
So the inertia you talk about, also just we keep doing things even though they're ridiculous, like the drug laws you were talking about.
Yep.
But we are doing okay. But here's the thing: humans have a mask. We have the story we tell on the surface, and we have the story that behind the scenes, the Machiavellian, the secret motivation. And we find this out from history, usually what the secret motivations were. So, and Richard Nixon in 1968 was mad at the anti-war people and America's black population. He was looking for something that could help him marginalize those two groups. He found it: marijuana. Per John Ehrlichman, assistant to the president of domestic affairs under Nixon. He wrote this later, of course. We knew we couldn't make it illegal to either be against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then the criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. So, of course, this goes to the Controlled Substance Act of 1970, which classified marijuana at Schedule 1 on par with heroin rather than Schedule 5, which includes lighter drugs like pain relievers. And, of course, millions of people were arrested, incarcerated, families broken, careers ruined, education growth thwarted, even though the most popular drug, or was the most popular substance in the United States, alcohol, is obviously more dangerous. A child can tell you that. You don't have to study this to know that alcohol is extremely dangerous. You can die from it in one day. You'd have to. I heard you'd have to smoke a field of marijuana to die from it, or be like asphyxiated by it to die from it. So at this 1970 law kept going until July 2024.
Yep.
The classification rather. And so, all sorts of horrible things happen. Gangs, people getting arrested for possession. Like, the amount of money we spent fighting the war on drugs instead of getting rehabilitation and working on why people were using drugs in the first place is so stupid. Right. And I mean, you quote Thomas Jefferson right after that. Experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Exactly.
So anyway, more comments.
Change hurts.
Change hurts.
And in particular, there's like an inertia. Another example of inertia law, I think, which was there until 2021, is that, if I remember, in Indonesia, any woman joining the army had to prove that she's a virgin.
Oh yeah, I read that. Yeah.
Like, why? And well, good that they finished it in 2021, by the way, not 70s.
They got rid of it, yeah.
Yeah, like, it was there because it was there. Or, you know what? There's another law of inertia where if in Brazil, if you're an unmarried daughter of an officer, you get a pension. So no daughters of officers ever get married because somebody introduced this law some time ago. Nobody remembers why, but it's still going on, right?
So there's all of these things that sort of self-serve people that we don't really reflect on, and often are used for manipulative purposes to gain power, money, control. Because when humans are frightened, or when they feel irrelevant, instead of looking for what we know to work, which is community, relationships, belonging, spirituality, philosophy, activities, hobbies, a lot of people go, and maybe influenced by testosterone. I'm not saying women don't do this, but they go to the need of power and control. I want to have power. I want to be somebody. I want to do something, right? And I want to control. I don't want to be controlled, right? And we have these biological mechanisms in us. And these are the things that we learn from trauma-informed therapy, which are when somebody feels there's a threat. And we used to think they're all tigers and bears and other tribes. But now anything can be a threat, even something on the TV. We have the reactions inside the body: fight, flight, freeze. Okay, those are the big ones. Fight, I'm going to fight somebody. I'm going to flight, I'm going to run away. I'm going to freeze. I freeze my tracks. Now there's more. Fawn, which is I'm going to people please. I'm going to please you and say a bunch of bullshit so that I can get out of the situation, right? Or I'm going to go about and follow the rules. Fracture, which is a mental state of dissociation, which is what we often see in people that are feeling like dissociated from reality or they're not really present. And then we have collapse, which is when somebody just totally breaks down and kind of gives up. We have these mechanisms in our body that have served us to keep us alive. That is why they're there, we think. They were there to keep us alive because these reactions are instantaneous. And what we've learned from the newer trauma-informed brain science is that we often react before we think in these situations. And we make up a story later to explain to people why we did what we did. And yet, most humans are ignorant to the fact that these are normal human things. For instance, I heard a story of a child who was at a park and their friend was getting beat up by 4 other children. And of course, they got scared and ran away. So they flight. So later on, the adults scolded the child and said, why? What, do you not care about your friend? How dare you walk away? Which is this whole like retro, it's easy for you to say you weren't there, right? But also flight is one of the things humans do. And we all have a kind of a predilection for one or the other. And yet we make up all these stories about what was actually happening as a biological mechanism, I think partly because humans don't like to see themselves as fallible. We know we die where we think other animals aren't as cognizant of it. We know that other animals mourn when other animals die. We think other animals are stupid. You read these books from the 1800s from these scientists. They thought animals were stupid. They're not stupid. They're just like us. They just have a smaller nervous system and a smaller brain. So I bring up that because I think a lot of these things are coming from the dysregulation and misunderstanding of what it means to be human, and lack of education and lack of sort of wise leadership due to various things. That's where I was kind of going with that. But because I want to go to some of the positives, but I wanted to hear, do you, in the book, I'm not sure because I didn't read the entire book yet, but I will. But what do you think about sort of the way that humans behave and not understanding their humanity and their biological nature? Any thoughts on that?
There's tons of it. There's ton of behaviors we do not control, and we behave like we behave, and we don't know how we behaved.
Yes.
Linking this to what you mentioned, a lot of those behaviors that are irrational come from how our brain works. We go essentially amygdala, right? So basically, this amygdala, which is this part of our brain, which is like a almond shape, is at the back of temporal lobe, is our fight or flight mechanism thing. It's our danger detector, right? It's very important because it kept us alive till now. This is why when you see something dangerous, whatever, when you see the fire, when there's an animal, you just run, you just or freeze or whatever, right? Or you just you prioritize information. However, in contemporary world, we should be more using the prefrontal cortex, which is cautious decision, right? And nonetheless, we do a lot of either amygdala-based decisions, or even worse, we do shortcuts, mental shortcuts, heuristics, right? Which basically means biases, right? Our brain is only 2% of our body mass and eats 20% of our oxygen. It's a very expensive organ to maintain. And we get 11 million of bits of information every second. And we process only 50, 60. From 11 million, we process 50, 60. This means that we have to totally prioritize. That's why amygdala exists. And that's why we have problem with attention and everything. We need shortcuts because you cannot consciously process so much information. I'm giving a lot of examples in the book. When you are in a party and you pick up an apple and you eat it, you don't think with your prefrontal cortex, because if you were to think with the prefrontal cortex, you would have to ask your neighbor who offered the apple, oh, was it grown using herbicides? Does it have you checked if it has worms inside? Or there's probably you could come up with 20 very logical questions before eating an apple. But you know what? You don't. It's too expensive a process. You just grab it, and your eye and brain within second, just if there is no big deformations, you just eat it. And the same thing, sadly, we do with our social contexts, right? We unfortunately simplify relationships with each other with the same paradigm.
Yes, and I was hearing recently that our brain's taking all this information. Our brain, we have the five senses, right? We have touch, taste, smell, sight. I can't remember. Hearing, right? So yeah, okay. Those are the ones we're taught in school, in elementary school. But I was listening to a psychologist, or it was actually not a psychologist. It was a neuroscientist saying there was somewhere between 25 and 29 other phenomena going on that we're unconscious of. So like oxygen levels in your blood, temperature regulation in the body, weird intuition stuff they can't really measure yet, like where your body can feel threats but can't articulate them. Different, just regeneration of cells, like detoxification.
That's exactly this 11 million.
Right.
You don't think oh, shall I digest more now, or shall I increase the blood flow to my brain? No, you just, your prefrontal cortex
is doing it.
It's doing it. It's just,
right.
It's just
your kidneys are filtering right now. So anyway, so it's just interesting how smart we think we are, but we're very stupid. We have a tendency towards radicalism. Why is that?
Well, because it is a good story. Radicalism creates good stories, right? Radicalism is, we love good stories. It's how we evolved, exactly what you said, right? We started just telling stories to each other. It created society, it created myths, common shared beliefs, etc. So the better the story, the more we believe it. And sadly, if you have a dramatic story or a crazy story, it's a better story to tell, right? And that's why people follow it. A lot of people follow it, and we are not good at just statistically. There's this famous book by Kahneman and
Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow.
Thinking Fast and Slow, which show exactly that we are very bad at calculating in real time the probabilities of and measured responses to things. We just fall into the extreme, left or right. If probability is of losing is this, we undercut it, right? If probability of winning, we oversize it, right? I'm giving example in my book that when price is reduced from $1 to 99, we kind of radically think oh, it's cheap, it's really cheap. If it's $1, do you know that people will buy 66% more people will buy $99 object than $1 object? 66% or 63, I think it was percent, literally. So if you have the same stuff at $1 or 99 cents, you will fool so many more people. That just shows how more, a lot of people will categorize it as, it's cheap. So it's kind of left or right. It's kind of, 99 and $1, it's actually the same thing, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and that's when you get into sort of what I call dark psychology manipulation, where salespeople will tell you a story. I once went to a sales course just to see what they were saying. I did not sign up for the program. I was the only person who did not sign up for this very expensive coaching program about sales. The only reason I went was because my friend said, you should go to this. It will teach you a lot of things. And what it taught me was what not to do, which was don't be deceitful, don't be dishonest, and don't sell bullshit. Sell quality, because quality sells. And yes, you may not become a juggernaut, but you will have a successful business if you're honest. And I listen to these shysters, and they told me their tactics, and I wrote them all down, and I was like, this is literally lying to people, but you're seeing it as selling value. That's what they call it. Oh, selling value. And they would always link it back to like, you have to provide for your family. And I was like, with this kind of money that you guys are making, it's not about providing for your family. You got like, private jets, you got a freaking ranch in Texas. I mean, and they still advertise. I see their coaching group advertising to medical professionals all the time to basically reduce the quality of services and have people overpay for it. Now, we can't do that in my profession anyway. So I wasn't even going for my profession. I was going because somebody told me to go and it was free, of course. All these other people signed up for it because of pressure tactics, the guys, of course, they all have a tearjerker story. I'm not really sure if they're true. Like, oh, my mom was dying of cancer and then I like helped pay for her. And then I realized I had whatever. So there's the dark psychology. And in this world we're in, I won't go into conspiracy theories, but I think a conspiracy theory that is true is that a lot of people in power use dark psychology, Machiavellian tactics to maintain their power. And like we can see an example in history, we often see it in retrospect, like the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages with the Inquisition, accusing all these people for heresy between the 13th and the 19th centuries. If you didn't fit in typical society roles, for instance, you were an herbalist, or you were sort of a free thinker, or you were in one of those old mystery religions that existed before, you could face torture and death, especially women who were more independent. And it's just, and they were, that's when the whole witch burning stuff happened. And it's incredible to me that if you ask, and I don't want to stereotype, but if you ask your average Catholic about this stuff, they have no idea that this even happened. They don't even know their own history. It's bizarre to me. Anyway, thoughts about that?
Look, we, as society, we created so many things that seemed right at the time, right? Somewhere in the middle of medieval ages, and you have to explain why there was a Black Death, and you have to blame someone, right? Then 300 years later, where there's new technology, new proofs, new whatever, we still keep doing what we are doing, right? That's exactly the same thing. That's the inertia. But one thing that I didn't respond to you, which you said about the positive aspect of stupidity, which you asked, and I just realized I haven't never responded to it. I focused on the other things, but yes, there is a positive aspect of stupidity. There's many instances where we are acting stupid on the individual basis for our own sake, and nonetheless, it is beautiful for us as a society. I was stunned doing a research and reading the report of a general after the Battle of Gettysburg, when he was reported to Lincoln that 50% of the muskets that they found on the battlefield were loaded twice. And for those who don't know much about guns, this means that if you load a musket twice, you cannot fire it, right? So that means that, and some of them were loaded multiple times, like 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. This means that a lot of people were faking that they were shooting. Wow. This is incredible. 50%. So if you assume that, the same amount of people die here and there, unless, it's just like then 50% of people were faking that they were shooting at other people. Isn't it beautiful that we have this innate reluctance to kill each other? There's this sociologist, I think was Marshall, I think, who was testing the American soldiers coming back from World War II. And after serious interviews, he concluded that only 20% of them were really shooting to kill. Most of them were refusing to kill, even in the situation of their own danger, right? I'm giving some other examples of, I was in London at the time of this terrorist attack, of when at the London Bridge attack, when basically there was jihadis who attacked innocent people
with
and
knives,
at London
right?
Bridge, with knives, and they were killing them like a rampage, like really brutal. And you know what? There were so many examples of completely irrational behaviors where people were doing things which are like a nurse, which was immediately ran and started helping people when they were still killing people in front of her, and she was killed, right? Like she she didn't think that, oh, these people are killing people, but there's people who are wounded. That's my job. I want to help them. How beautiful, isn't it? There was like
Yes.
a lawyer banker who was just skating there, and then he suddenly started fighting with those people with his skate because he just saw that they were trying to kill. He didn't. He had a way. He could run away. He had a tool. He was faster than others, and he did it. That's incredible. And then you look at those journalists and political dissidents and people who risk their life every day. Which seems to be stupid. Nonetheless, for society, it's a glorious, beautiful thing. It's a beautiful side of stupidity that we have, that we sometimes behave like a beehive than just individual bees.
Yes, and this is getting right into what to do about it, which you definitely need to read the book, everybody. So, books have maintained their price over the years. I've noticed they've been about $15 to $19. Well, coffee and gas and eggs and rent are all going up. So you can go to the library still, but you can also buy the book. What to do about it? You said here, Edmund Burke allegedly said, all that is necessary for the forces of evil to win in the world is for enough good men to do nothing. Which, by the way, I would argue that good men are incentivized to do nothing by economic threats to their well-being, especially if they have children. If you have children or are married as a male, and or women, exactly, you're married. If you have a job of any type, if you stand up for against evil, oftentimes, especially if the ruling power has more resources in the United States, the way to cut you off is economically. Maybe not. Being murdered, but you will economically suffer. And so thus a lot of moms and dads don't want to get involved because they don't want to lose their job, right?
Yeah.
And they don't want to get sued. But you say there's three types of solutions: education, mindset, and structural solutions. So let's jump into education, because I was stunned by some of these statistics of the average years of schooling in the United States, Canada, Russia, Australia, most of Europe. We have between 10 and 14 years of schooling. But in a lot of other countries, it is 6 or under. Can you explain that?
Yeah. So if you look at the world as the whole population, on average, we give only 6 years of schooling. Sorry, 9 years of schooling. 9 years of schooling. So if you start at age, I don't know, 6 or 7, like most of people do, like you finish by 15, 16, just on average. So that's why this hurrah optimism by this famous Hans, Rosling or whatever was his name, but it was this positive statistician that, the amount of illiteracy is decreasing, etc. So what? Like, still there's billion people are illiterate. But you know what? If you can read and write, and you cannot do much more, that means that actually probably after 5-10 years, you actually are functionally illiterate. You don't understand what you read and write, right? So education is absolutely needed and required, and it's essential tool of solving this problem. And you know what? It's already a political battle. You know that in Mexico, first of all, the societies which are well educated and are prosperous are difficult to manipulate. So politicians don't like it. Politicians prefer the society which depend on them, on the handouts, right? And are not well educated because they are easily manageable. So, for example, AMLO, Andreas Manuel Labrador, the former president of Mexico, he won his second, I think, term. It was one of his elections. He won because the critical factor was that he supported the two labor unions, which were super powerful, which were gathering the teachers in the country, that were against the recently enacted law of his predecessor. So it must have been his first elections, which was prohibiting not showing up at school and refused to pay for the dead teacher's salary. So basically, the law, which was very, very objectively logical that you should not pay the salary when the teacher is dead, and then you should show up to work. He abolished this law and got support of the teachers' unions and won elections and became the president. Why? Because if you don't have to come to work as a teacher. Like a lot of people don't come in Mexico as teachers, right? So, and why do you think the Mexico has such a bad education system? It's because of that. And do you think it will have a better education system in 5 years? I don't think so, because the politicians are really at work to make sure it doesn't.
Well, I would say the same thing is happening in the United States, just in a much less dramatic fashion that is sort of clandestine.
It is. In California, you don't have to. In California, in the name of, I think, was racial equity, I think they were planning to remove calculus. I think finally it was not removed, or removed temporarily. I think it was 2000, in late to the 2019 or 18, something like that. It was ridiculous. Like, we need to bring everybody up, not bring everybody down, so that people don't feel that they are excluded.
Well, I mean, just the easiest evidence I can point to is that teachers' salaries in the United States are laughable. And so this incurs the most, intelligent students who may be, working towards something. They might be like, wow, I have a heart for teaching, but I can't live on that salary. Right.
Yep.
And not that the other teachers aren't intelligent, it's just that they're making a sacrifice, which means you have to rely on people making sacrifices. When actually, if children are our future, we should be investing not only in that. School buildings are falling apart. There's not enough school therapists. They don't teach emotional regulation skills in school. They don't teach basic banking. They don't teach you how to get an apartment. They don't teach you anything that you will need to know in the real world, except they don't say anything. I was hyperbole. They teach less of that stuff. And a lot of education needs to transform. It's pathetic. We don't invest in it. We invest way more in war and way more in other things. So you see that, and we're starting to see the results of that in our culture right now. So education is huge. And not only that, but you name a few things. We won't go into all of them, but just about biases, manipulation, logic, critical thinking, critical thinking is the root of all this, how to understand complexity, manipulation, biases. I think I was lucky because I went to a high school which is public. Now, of course, a lot of people with money put their kids in private school on purpose, right? Because they want their kids to be the next rulers of the people through business. I went to a public school that was ranked in the top 250 schools in the US, and it was a random suburb, and it was just lucky because I don't think it's ranked high anymore. But I got lucky because I had teachers who cared somehow and had their salaries. Their salaries are probably the same now as they were in 1990. Okay, which means in the 90s they were making pretty good money. Now they're not making such good money, but at the time I got lucky, and so did my classmates, because we weren't in private school. Mindset is huge. I definitely agree with you, but I think there's thousands of books and podcasts on this. But I want to kind of hear your take about mindset and why having a mindset of like, for instance, be humble, be honest, travel, talk to people, diversity, learning about others, using math.
But also having courage to oppose stupidity. Right?
Yes.
When you say stupidity, you should say something. You should fight it, because if we don't, it will multiply. It will grow bigger. It's a hydra. It regrows its heads all the time, right?
Yes.
And think about this. We made progress in the last 200 years, phenomenal progress, because limited number of people had the mindset of, we will fight stupidity. Like in 1830s. In UK, a lot of people in 1820s, they were fighting slavery, and you know what? They fought it. They said that, we're not going to do it. Then in early 1900s, people said, you know what? It's stupid that women don't have the voting rights. Like, we should fight. And it was big fight. It was mindset. There was a lot of women went to jail, men went to jail. There was a lot of families were broken. All that. Then there was a movement that maybe gay people should have a right to live as well, and they should be able to live normally as well. There was a blasphemy, in 50s, 60s, 70s, right? And somebody said, like, no, this is stupid. These are people like us. They should have the right to love as they want, right? So it's always about mindset. It's you need to oppose it, because if you don't oppose it, you will live in a place in the dictatorship ruled by a few companies, and you will do as you're told.
Yeah, and I think that's important, that we all can contribute in some way. Some of us are going to contribute to other larger than others, but yes, we have to fight for freedom of speech, because I think a lot of people born in the U.S. have a mentality that because we fought fascism in World War II and whatever, we always talk about World War II. We always want to talk about that one. We don't want to talk about the other ones. But because we did this supposedly great thing, that we are just somehow inherently great, and that it will always be that way, and that we don't really have to do anything to preserve that or to go forward, because we can just trust everybody, because we're all the grandchildren of these, of this generation. And that is such a load of propaganda. And it's so silly, because there are always going to be groups of people or individuals or whatever that want a piece of something. And it usually goes to greed, I think. Greed, power, control. They want something. They have a worldview that they want to push onto other people. They want to control how people can be. They want only certain people to vote. All these things, they haven't gone away, because there are individuals who are disintegrated, meaning they've had something happen to them, and instead of dealing with it themselves, they take it out on the rest of us. And that's just a theory, but that's what I see in society all the time on a micro level, and it happens on a macro level too. And so nothing will ever be completely fair. But if you want things to be more fair, you have to fight for it, because there are a lot of blocks in place. So that goes to the last point, which is structural solutions. I agree with all of these. Reform education, clean up the legal system, reduce pollution. I mean, one of the things I was talking about with some young people recently, I'm young, but they're younger than me, half my age. We were talking about the prison system, and how in the prison system in the United States, the recidivism rate is insanely high. And we don't mandate for everyone to be in some type of educational class in there, and rehabilitation classes and rehabilitation activities. We let them go to the gym, stab each other, go to the commissary and buy food from somebody, like in Arizona, Sheriff Joe Arpaio's family ran the commissary. So they were getting rich off people buying food that their people's families, sent them money for extra snacks because the food was horrible, and phone calls. His sister owned that. His brother owned the commissary. I mean, we just let this corruption occur because we didn't know about it till later. But I mean, it's like this. The prison system, we have all these people in there. We could be mandating that they take classes that could be taught by people in the jail, even if it was by video. We make them do it. They're incarcerated, but instead we don't do that, or we use their cheap labor. In fact, in Alabama, Mississippi, and other states like that, the main fast food workers are prisoners on work release that are getting paid 25 cents an hour. In California, same thing, but it's usually clothing companies. Okay. This is ridiculous versus and then they come out, they don't have any, a few of them have skills, but a lot of people come out and they reoffend immediately, which just costs us more money as a society, but we're making money off their labor. Anyway, so we're talking about how absurd that is. Is it helping our society to lock these people? No, there are people that should be locked up forever. The antisocial, sociopathic people that cannot be rehabilitated, but a lot of the other people are just honestly ignorant people. They're lacking education. They have trauma. That sort of thing.
But we make, let's say that somebody made something stupid or bad and served a prison sentence, and this person wants to get better, which is the whole premise of the rehabilitation of prison, right? Like you put somebody away so that they can think it over and they get better, right?
Right.
If not, we should kill everyone, right? Like if you don't believe in rehabilitation, right? And then we don't give these people chance to start normal life. You know why? Because everything in US, if you want to get a job, they always check your criminal record. And if you have criminal record, you will not get a job. So how can you function as a society which doesn't want you to earn money legally? Then the only thing you can do is to reoffend.
Go back to illegal.
Go back to bad things. Like that's ridiculous, right? That is ridiculous. Actually, on the point of working, I think that it can be done better, but I'm in favor of prisoners working because this creates a habit of waking up, doing something, and you know what? And it can be transferred exactly to private sector. That's exactly what we want. We want them to start working and have family and have goals, save money for the car, for this, for that. Just have something to aspire to rather than have nothing to lose, and then you do violent or stupid things.
Oh, I'm in favor of it too. I just felt like the prisoners should actually earn a decent amount of money so that when they get out, they could actually pay for an apartment or something versus the state just pocketing it all. But yes, I agree with that. And education. So there's so many things in here. What's one of your favorite structural changes that if you had your way right now, if we elected you as governor of whatever, where are you right now?
Wow. I think it would be reform of the legal system.
Okay.
Because, legal system ultimately defines everything.
Right.
Because it is a godlike activity. You discern between the good and bad. You are like God. You say that for this, you will be revered. For this, you will be sentenced. Right. And the legal system in the US is just terrible. So terrible. Right. It's for another podcast, right? There's a lot of this in the book. So basically, you need to make the system designed as fair because then people will respond to it. We are doing what the incentivize us to do, right? So that's why if the legal system, if there is only one thing we can change, if you could change the legal system so that it is a fairer, better, more just, I think that it will have a tremendous impact on us because we will behave differently.
Uh-oh. 1 second. Okay. Cezary, can you hear me?
Yep.
Your internet or my internet went out for a second, so I'm going to have to do an edit on this.
Okay, no worries.
So could you repeat that last part that you just said about the healthcare system? On the legal system, yeah. The last couple of sentences.
Yes, sure. So if I could change only one thing, I would still do the legal system intervention so that the system is fair, so that the people believe in justice and believe in the simplest form that the evil will be punished and the good will be promoted. That's what we need. And the current legal system in US is not encouraging this. It's a self-serving system. So if I could change one thing, I would do that. But you know what? I could do many other things. And one other completely different thing, like the least serious thing that I would suggest that people take into their heart and they start doing immediately is partner dancing. This is an incredible tool.
I saw that.
In fighting stupidity. Can you believe that partner dancing is off the charts in preventing dementia?
Yes.
Like if you do golfing or swimming or bicycling, it has basically zero impact on preventing dementia. But if you do cross puzzles, it's good.
47% reduction.
But partner dancing is like 76% better results. It's off the charts. You know why? Because you have to fire so much neurons. You have to exercise your brain muscle, which is a muscle, very hard because never the same. The dance is never the same. The partner might be different. The music is different. The place you're dancing is different. The emotions, etc. You have to process so much information in a relatively easy, funny way, that it really keeps you very, very, your brain in a very, very good shape.
Well, and you have to be present with the partner to be able to feel the way the dance goes. There's so many things, whereas golfing, swimming, and bicycle riding, you could be thinking about something else. Reading, you could be distracted. Crossword puzzles, 47% engages with 76% reduction in the risk of dementia because it engages I think it engages the mind, it engages the body, but it also engages the heart, because you can feel something, even if you're not in love with the person you're dancing with, you can feel something.
Yep.
There was a doctor recently, an MD, who was saying, and I think he's right about this, but being in a loving relationship or cuddling with your partner could literally reduce inflammation by epigenetic, which is wild. So then you see violence, right? I mean, I hate to end on a bad note, but was 147 women are killed a day in domestic violence attacks? Something like that. Yeah. Insane amount of violence that we have in our world. 137 killed every day. But we say this because love and being present, I think, is the best of humanity, right? And violence and fear and greed are some of the worst. Now, I'm not a philosophy professor. I'm just a guy. But I think it's important that we use our heart and our mind, and especially, I think it's important to evaluate what we're doing and fight for what's right after you've evaluated it. So this book, of course, goes through what's wrong, but what we can do about it. Homo Idioticus, why we are stupid and what to do about it. And we always say in therapy, the first step to change is acknowledgement, is I do have a problem. I have a problem. I'm not sure what to do about it. I'm frustrated about it. I may not know, but then I can start showing up somewhere, right? They say the hardest part about exercising is getting to the gym, is getting yourself to start, right? But once you start, you can do it. So I think it's a very inspiring read. And Cezary, I know you're doing a lot of stuff in the world, and we didn't even get into your job and all of that you're doing. But I'm sure people can look you up and find out about that in the future, and hopefully you write another book and send it to me. So
thank you. It was a pleasure, Paul. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much as well. And there you have it. This has been another episode of the Intentional Clinician Podcast. If you are enjoying the show, please leave us a rating on iTunes or share the show with people you know. I would surely appreciate it. As some of you know, I am passionate about preventing future violence in the United States. I have started a nonprofit with colleagues called the National Violence Prevention Hotline, which is a 501c3 organization. We are endeavoring to gain funding and collaborators and volunteers so that we can start a 24/7 hotline and chat line to reach potential perpetrators before they may act violently. It is a bold effort to curb violence and save innocent lives by working to connect with potential offenders while they are in the planning stages of violence, help to de-escalate them, and provide resources so that they can get appropriate professional help. The National Violence Prevention Hotline is looking to open up a conversation about violence in society, the causes, and the solutions. You can learn more by visiting our website at violencepreventionhotline.org. You can get involved by writing your congressperson from our website, sharing it with your network, or even donating to the cause. If you are looking for an EMDR International Association consultant, I am a consultant and I can help provide 20 hours that you need to become EMDRIA certified. Just check out the show notes and send me a message and see if we're a good fit to work together. If you are in need of counseling, do not hesitate to make an appointment with a local counselor in your area. You can also make an appointment with the excellent clinicians at Health for Life Counseling in Grand Rapids as part of the Trauma Informed Counseling Center of Grand Rapids by visiting www.healthforlifegr.com. And if you are in the state of Michigan, you can also schedule a telehealth appointment. The recording you just listened to consists of the personal opinions of Paul Krauss and his guest, and while these are based upon the literature they have read and the experience in their respective fields, the information on this podcast should not be viewed or thought of as the definitive opinion on any subject. Listening to this podcast is not a substitute for treatment. If you're in a crisis, please call 911 or the National Crisis Line at 988. Support your local bookstore by shopping at bookshop.org. That's www.bookshop.org. It donates a percentage of sales to local bookstores all across the United States, which I think gives character to our cities and a place to hang out and a place to explore. You can order from the comfort of your own home online while supporting businesses near you. If you are a therapist and you are not involved in your local counseling or therapist or social work organization, please get involved to at least pay dues so that we can have lobbyists help keep mental health care accessible at the government level, and also expanding into schools and other places that need it. And also, if you didn't know, counseling organizations and professional organizations are working to keep us from becoming gig workers for a lot of large corporations who are coming in and trying to buy up local counseling agencies or basically pay you what they pay for people to deliver food to your house. So, get involved. Until next time on The Intentional Clinician, I wish you all a safe and peaceful week.